Hey, last time we checked in, we had a basic shell for our growing dome, pretty big to-do list remaining. Well, it's almost time to get back to school, and after chipping away this summer, we're at a point where we're pretty much ready to plant some stuff this coming fall.
Awkward!
If you've seen our past videos, you probably know our learning curve has been pretty steep. We'll try to put everything in the timeline down below, but in this episode, we'll run through some of the smaller jobs on our to-do list, show how we designed and built our raised beds, and then sit down with local permaculture expert Jenn Neufeld and talk about what Hugelkultur is and why we chose this method for filling our raised beds. As always, feel free to share, subscribe, and like this video in order to help us grow this channel. At the end of the school year, we had our growing dome shell up, but we still had lots to do. One thing we had to do is we had to insulate our little 2-foot stem wall, so we contracted that out and we chose to spray foam it. This will give us a pretty high R value and will also stand up to the moisture that the interior of our dome will inevitably be exposed to. We also had to close up the seams on the exterior. The dome kit comes with this really handy 3M tape. We kind of wondered how we were going to get this part done, but ultimately with some ladders, pool noodles, and then bare feet up on top, we ended up with this being our plan of attack. The tape actually goes on pretty easy, and you just follow the seams with runs as long as possible. The one thing they do stress is wiping it down with isopropyl alcohol as you go, but thankfully that's not something we've ever been short of in our chem prep room. We've had a couple of strong rains since then, and so far it's been holding up great. Other little jobs we had to take care of included putting up some shade cloth to keep things a bit cooler, because it's been hot, and then also installing our solar panels for our climate battery, as well as the smaller version that runs through our raised beds. We'll eventually have a larger off-grid system, which will provide us more reliable power, but in the meantime, this fan will help allow us to run our climate battery, although a little less efficiently. This is a 14-inch Climate Cool Gable fan, and if you're looking for something, this is something that we definitely recommend because it meets all the specs that we need for a climate battery like ours. It's 14 inches, pretty high CFMs, and it actually runs pretty well on just even low light conditions on the panel. We also hooked up kind of this box which comes with the kit, which is with its own tiny fan, and it feeds into these tubes which run along either side of the greenhouse and then come out on the north end. One of our last jobs was to build our 11-foot diameter pond. With the dome, you have to supply the metal, but the kit comes with everything else. First, we had to dig out and level the location of our pond. That was a lot of digging. And then we actually drilled and bolted the metal together well into the evening one day, and then slowly got it rounded out and into place. The kit comes with a large rectangular liner, so we got that folded up according to the instructions, tossed it into the pond, and then got it set into place. Still have like a really tiny bit of work to do on this as we slowly fill it up, but we're waiting to get word on where our water is going to come from, and so that's just kind of on hold for the meantime. So that leaves us with our raised beds and how we filled them. But first, check this out. So this isn't sponsored, but I did want to take a minute to recognize a group that's making a difference in communities all across Canada. And this group is called Communities in Bloom. It's a volunteer-based organization who really just set out to educate the community and make the space more beautiful. Communities in Bloom in our community has been responsible for things like community gardens, different signage around the wetlands, and then also our edible birth forest. You might not have a Communities in Bloom in your community. If not, you probably have something similar. So next time you run into someone from one of these volunteer groups, make sure you give them a quick thanks for everything they do to promote things like sustainability, nutrition, and just healthy growing practices in general. One major project was the construction of our raised beds. I'm not a carpenter, but we did want something that we could start with come fall, and I did watch my fence get built. Eagle Lake Landscape Supply was awesome, and they donated 12 yards of compost-rich soil, but we still needed somewhere to put it. We built our beds first, and then we have some cool construction projects planned for the rest of the space, especially the interior beds. We decided on this painted metal for the large part of the beds with cedar supports and then a cedar top cap. The darker metal will give us a bit of a solar gain, more than what the wood was. And again, we're thinking more about winter at the moment. We do have some options to cool it in the summer and realize our students are here most often in the winter. So that's currently where our mind is, as it is still pretty hot in here. In building the beds, we went with a 32-inch width, apparently from Reddit and Facebook groups. That seems to be what's most comfortable for most people, and it still gives you a decent growing space. First, the 4x4 cedar posts were set on landscape blocks, and then I used a 2x4 to set the distance from a wall. And then I ran a 2x4 stringer across the top and was constantly checking for things being level along the way. I then used a metal sheet nibbler and a sawzall to cut them into the right shape, the metal bits, and then I screwed them in with the screws that came with the sheet metal into the wood itself. I then cut down the 4x4s to the right height, and working slowly, I was able to fix that 2x6 top cap on top. And it ends up with something that's actually really sturdy. I'm sitting on the beds right now, and the plan is that when community groups are in here, they can use this as a bench, and it also hides that sheet metal top. The other thing that I did is I put some hone wrap, I taped it up over the foundation wall to protect that a bit so that there wasn't as much moisture sitting on that part of it. And then I used some landscape fabric to plug any of the voids where the sheet metal met up with those 4x4 posts. These beds ended up being pretty deep, so it wasn't really feasible to think about filling them with soil alone. But thankfully, we had the help of Jenn Neufeld from Flowing Springs Permaculture and Soil Health. Using some firewood rounds we found on Facebook Marketplace, some straw bales from the just ended stampede, and then dead sticks and leaves we found lying around the growing dome, we were able to come up with a solution.
Well, I'm here at the greenhouse with Mr. Hintz. We're building Hugelkultur beds, and what we've done is put large logs in the bottom, some branches on top, some straw on top of that, and then we're filling it in with soil that we've gotten from Eagle Lake. A Hugelkultur bed is designed to provide a whole lot of nutrients and resources for the soil organisms, but also for the plants. As it decays over time, breaks down, we got all kinds of carbon and nitrogen and all the other essential elements that the plants need to grow. So the Hugelkultur also has lots of air spaces in between all of the big pieces, and that provides movement for water, for air, and also for the microorganisms to move around, like our worms that we're going to introduce later on. That creates an aerobic environment so that things can continue to grow, because oxygen is important for the roots. As they develop, it's also important for the microorganisms in the soil. So the healthy ones anyways. There's a couple different types of Hugelkultur. One is the raised bed kind like we have here, where we're building it into a container of some sort. And the other kind is a sunken Hugelkultur, where you dig a trench and you put all of your materials in the bottom of the trench and build it up that way. And then at the end of it, it's kind of level with the ground. There's a lot of benefits to Hugelkultur. Some of the mounded ones that you may have heard about provide different access to sun in different ways, so you can get some different microclimates going on in there. It's a really inexpensive way to build a garden bed.
We are super excited to have someone like Jenn in our community and are looking forward to some of the stuff she's planning for community members both inside this space and out of it. Thanks for checking in with us at Awkward Aquaponics. It's been a hot one. We have a lot of stuff coming up for this space, including our DIY off-grid solar system, our first planting, and then navigating our first winter. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. And hey, we'll catch you next time.
Awkward.